Let's talk about this. Your LH strip matches the app, so the app might be telling you that you're ovulating, but then cervical mucus comes 2 days later. What does that mean? Now, before we get into potential reasons for the scenario, we want to understand what LH is actually doing and what the LH testing strips are telling us. So first and foremost, we want to understand that a positive LH test does not mean that you're ovulating in that moment. So if you have a positive LH test, it does not mean you're ovulating that day. What it does tell you is that in your urine, there were a lot of luteinizing hormone metabolites that were detected by the strip, and therefore it measured positive. We also want to keep in mind that an app telling you you're ovulating today does not know that based on just calculating when your period starts and when it ends and how long your usual average cycle is. They can just do an estimate on when ovulation might be happening, but they don't know that, oh, next Tuesday you will be ovulating for sure. Now, what LH does is it's coming from the brain and it's telling your ovaries to release an egg. And that usually happens about 12 to about 36 hours after that LH testing strip tests positive. However, we want to make sure to understand too that a positive LH test doesn't necessarily always mean that ovulation will for sure follow. That's why we test with basal body temperature to make sure that our temperature is actually rising after the positive LH test to understand, yes, we have ovulated, because we can only confirm ovulation has happened when we do either progesterone testing or we use our basal body temperature to see if progesterone has risen our body temperature. Again, our LH testing strip is just telling us that LH is currently elevated. It doesn't tell us anything at all if the egg is actually being released in a couple of hours following that positive LH test. So it's very common that we actually see cervical mucus around that time when we see a positive LH testing strip. So we have two scenarios that might have happened in this case right here. First scenario is actually the normal one. You have a positive LH test followed by cervical fluid and also the release of the egg cell about 12 to 36 hours after that positive LH test, which seems to be aligning with what symptoms you're experiencing. Or the second scenario could be that you had a positive LH test, you had cervical mucus buildup, but you might have not ovulated in this case and ovulated at a later point. You can have more than one LH test that reads positive in a cycle, especially if you're somebody that has PCOS or longer cycles. There can be times when you have multiple LH surges, so your body is trying to ovulate with those surges happening. However, it might not happen after 1 or 2 trials, depending on what is going on with the other hormones that also are kind of orchestrating and influencing that process.